I thought my wife was planning a surprise anniversary, until I found a hotel receipt with someone else's name on it. Ethan Cole had always assumed that the quietest parts of a marriage were the strongest. The shared looks across a crowded school auditorium during their daughter Lily's performance, the way his wife, Marissa, would text him reminders about their son Caleb's soccer practice, the steady rhythm of a family life that didn't need grand gestures to feel secure. Their 10th anniversary was coming up, and Ethan thought he recognized the signs of a surprise in the making. Marissa stepping out for long phone calls, closing her laptop quickly when he walked into the room, leaving early for errands she never described in detail. He didn't question any of it, not even when she asked him to take extra shifts so she could get things ready. If anything, the secrecy made him smile. He imagined a dinner reservation somewhere expensive, maybe a weekend trip she'd finally managed to plan. Lily and Caleb picked up on the energy too. Lily kept asking if the family was doing something special, and when Ethan told her he thought Mom was planning a surprise, she grinned like she'd been let in on something magical. The house felt lighter for a while, and Ethan let himself enjoy the anticipation. What cracked the illusion wasn't dramatic. It was a folded receipt in Marissa's coat pocket that fell onto the kitchen floor when Ethan picked it up to hang it. He almost tossed it out, assuming it was from a grocery store, but the hotel logo at the top stopped him cold. He unfolded it without thinking, expecting confusion and finding something else entirely, a reservation for a single king suite. Tonight's, under the name Marissa Cole, but signed on the accompanying form by a man Ethan didn't know. The handwriting wasn't rushed. It looked practiced, like someone who'd filled out hotel paperwork often. Ethan stood there long enough for the kettle to boil dry, staring at the signature, the date, the credit card code that wasn't his. He placed the receipt on the counter, took a breath, and forced himself to finish making lunch for the kids because they had a field trip and would ask questions he couldn't answer yet. Later, while Caleb chased the soccer ball across the living room, Ethan asked Marissa about her day, listening carefully to the pauses she tried to smooth over. She mentioned errands, but not hotels, mentioned planning, but not travel, mentioned stress, but not the kind that required secrecy. He didn't confront her. He watched the way she kept her phone tilted away from him, how she overcompensated with affection toward the kids, offering ice cream after dinner even though it was a school night. The kids didn't notice the strain yet, but Ethan felt it pressing against every interaction. That night, after the kids were asleep, he waited for Marissa to settle beside him, waited until she rolled over, assuming he was already drifting off, and then slipped out of bed and into the hallway. He found her purse on the dining table and checked the bank statements on the shared account. Several charges lined up with the hotel receipt: parking garage, restaurant, bar, none outrageous enough to trigger suspicion on their own, but all tied to the same neighborhood. Ethan printed them quietly, folded them, and hid them in a book on the top shelf of the office cabinet. Unsure what he was preparing for, knowing he had to collect evidence before confronting a story she would try to reshape. The next morning, Caleb refused to eat breakfast unless Ethan sat beside him, and Lily asked why Mom seemed tired even though she'd gone to bed early. Marissa brushed it off, blaming stress, kissing their heads with a brightness that faded the moment they looked away. Ethan saw how easily she slipped into roles that kept questions at bay. When he dropped the kids at school, the thought of the hotel room followed him into the car like a shadow that knew his name. He didn't tell anyone, not his brother, who would explode, not his mother, who would cry, not his coworker, who might tell jokes to make him forget. He wanted facts, not sympathy. That afternoon, he drove to the hotel. He stood in the lobby long enough to memorize the layout, the smell, the way the elevator chimed. He didn't ask the front desk anything. He knew they wouldn't tell him. Instead, he walked past the bar and saw a reflection in the mirror, a woman laughing at something a man said, her posture too familiar, too comfortable. For a split second, he thought it was Marissa, but when the woman turned, the relief came too fast, too sharp, leaving something hollow behind. He returned home, picked up the kids, helped with homework, and waited for Marissa to arrive from another late-night errand. When she walked in, flushed from the cold, she kissed Ethan on the cheek, thanked him for holding things together, and told him he'd understand everything soon. The words landed heavier than she intended. Ethan tucked the kids into bed, listened to Marissa humming in the shower, and sat on the edge of their bed staring at the anniversary card he had bought the week before. He placed it in the drawer, closed it carefully, and knew the next days would pull his life apart or reveal something he couldn't unsee. And either way, the surprise he'd imagined was gone. Ethan woke before dawn, not because an alarm demanded it, but because his mind refused to rest, replaying the hotel receipt over and over until the numbers blurred into something heavier than facts. Marissa moved beside him with the easy familiarity of someone whose world hadn't shifted, stretching lightly before heading to the kitchen to start the coffee. Ethan followed a few minutes later, watching her stir sugar into her mug as if she were rehearsing normalcy. She talked about the anniversary weekend again, dropping hints he was now listening to with a different kind of focus. When she mentioned final details, Ethan caught the moment her eyes flicked downward toward her phone before she redirected the conversation to the kids' school spirit day. It didn't matter how casual she tried to sound, something inside her was bracing, calculating what he did and didn't know. Lily wandered into the kitchen half asleep, rubbing her eyes, climbing onto Ethan's lap the way she did when the world felt too big before breakfast. She whispered that Mom had been awake a long time before sunrise, pacing quietly in the hallway. Ethan held her close, answering softly that some grown-ups carried stress differently, but even as he said it, he knew Lily sensed the tension faster than he wanted her to. That afternoon, Ethan stopped by the hotel again, not inside this time, but across the street, sitting in his car observing the steady rhythm of guests moving in and out. He wasn't stalking, he was bracing. He wanted to see if the man's name on the receipt matched a face, though he wasn't even sure what he'd do if he recognized him. When nothing emerged from the doors except strangers, Ethan left, stopping at the school early so he could watch the kids run around before dismissal, grounding himself in something that still made sense. As he helped Caleb paint a cardboard shield for a class project, the boy asked why Mom wasn't coming to the upcoming soccer game. Ethan said she was busy with something important, and Caleb nodded, not convinced, but accepting it the way children accept weather without the power to change it. Marissa arrived home that evening with new energy, as if she'd rehearsed her entrance. She talked too quickly, complimented the kids' projects, suggested a family movie night even though she had spent the past week barely at home. When Ethan asked if she wanted to stay in tomorrow instead of rushing off again, she hesitated before refusing, covering the pause with a practiced smile. The crack in her confidence grew a little more visible. After the kids went to bed, Ethan returned to the drawer where he had hidden the printed statements. He laid them out across the table, aligning the dates with her claimed surprise errands, seeing how perfectly they intertwined. He didn't have proof of the man's identity yet, but he had patterns, ones that didn't fit any version of loyalty he recognized. He decided that before confronting Marissa, he needed one more piece of clarity. The next morning, he asked a coworker who often handled credit card disputes about the hotel's billing notation. The coworker explained quietly that a signature from someone who wasn't the card holder often meant the room was shared, but paid for by a different person. Ethan thanked him and walked out as if the ground had changed under his shoes. That night, during dinner, Marissa mentioned meeting with a florist for a small surprise, but her voice trembled when she reached for the salt, barely noticeable unless someone was watching for it. Ethan watched. Lily noticed too. She poked at her food before asking her mother why she didn't read bedtime stories anymore and whether she'd be home that night. Marissa froze, gave a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes, and promised she'd read double tomorrow. Lily looked down, already knowing that promise wouldn't be kept. After the kids were asleep, Ethan stepped outside for air, standing in the cool quiet of the backyard, listening to the distant hum of traffic. When he returned inside, he found Marissa sitting on the couch clutching her phone tightly, clearing notifications faster than he could read them from a distance. She looked up and asked why he'd been so quiet lately, her tone light but lined with fear she hadn't managed to hide. Ethan sat across from her, studying the woman he thought he knew better than anyone. Before he could decide whether to speak, Marissa's phone buzzed again, and for the first time, she didn't reach for it immediately. She stared at the screen, then turned it face down as if the light itself could betray her. Ethan realized then that whatever lay ahead was not a misunderstanding, not a mistake, not something that could be packaged neatly into an apology. This wasn't just the beginning of a truth, this was the moment she started to understand he wouldn't ignore it. The turning point arrived without theatrics, unfolding instead through a series of small reactions Marissa couldn't control. The next morning she stood at the counter buttering toast for the kids the way she always did on autopilot. But her hands were trembling, and that's enough for Ethan to notice. He watched her drop the knife twice, watched her check the time as though she were late for something she hadn't told anyone about, watched her freeze when Lily asked if Mom would be home for dinner or eating somewhere else again. Marissa forced a laugh that sounded nothing like her, insisting she'd be home, promising she'd cook something special. Ethan didn't believe her, and neither did the kids. They exchanged a look they didn't think he noticed, the kind that belonged to children trying to map the quirks of a storm they had no power to stop. At school drop-off, Caleb clung to Ethan longer than usual, and when Ethan bent down to ask what was wrong, Caleb whispered that he didn't like when Mom came home late because she smelled like a place he didn't know. Ethan hugged him tight, feeling the sting of a truth discovered unintentionally by a child who shouldn't have had to interpret adult secrets. On the drive home, Ethan's mind kept returning to the hotel receipt, the mystery signature, the shifts in Marissa's behavior, and the way she had begun moving through the house like a guest rehearsing excuses. He spent the afternoon gathering quiet evidence, not snooping out of malice, but documenting what had already unraveled. Phone records tied her late nights to a single number. Bank logs revealed charges clustered in patterns. Every detail formed a narrative Marissa was pretending didn't exist. When she came home that evening, breathless and flustered, offering apologies about traffic that didn't match the GPS location still open on her phone, Ethan felt something inside him settle, not anger exactly, but clarity. During dinner, Lily spilled her water and burst into tears, overwhelmed by almost nothing. Marissa knelt beside her, trying to comfort her, but Lily shrank away, pressing herself into Ethan's side, mumbling that Mom never listened anymore. Marissa's face faltered for just a moment, her confidence beginning to slip under the weight of a child's honesty. After the kids went to bed, Ethan finally asked where she had really been that evening. He didn't raise his voice or corner her. He simply asked in a tone calm enough to make evasion difficult. Marissa froze mid-step, gripping the back of a chair as though steadying herself. She said she'd been planning something, said he would ruin everything if he kept digging, said he needed to trust her the way he used to. The words came too fast, wrapped in panic rather than conviction. Ethan asked about the hotel. She blinked, then claimed the florist had a consultation room there. Ethan didn't respond. He just watched her stumble through a lie so thin it collapsed under its own weight. Her eyes hardened with a sudden defensiveness, the kind that appeared only when someone felt cornered by their own script rather than by another person. She accused him of spying, of sabotaging his own anniversary, of trying to make her feel guilty for wanting something special. But Ethan didn't engage. He simply said her explanations didn't match reality anymore, and the silence that followed was sharper than any argument. Later that night, he heard her whispering in the bathroom, voice tight with urgency, telling someone she couldn't do this much longer, that Ethan was starting to put things together, that the timing was getting dangerous. Ethan stood outside the cracked door, listening to the person he thought he knew speaking in a tone she'd never used with him. When she emerged, she flinched at the sight of him standing in the hallway, then forced a smile that didn't belong to her face. She brushed past him, claiming exhaustion, but Ethan noticed her take her phone into the closet instead of charging it on the nightstand like she always had. The next day brought confirmation from an unexpected direction. The hotel called an automated message about a recent stay survey addressed to Marissa, mistakenly routed to the shared line. Ethan played it twice, each repetition pressing the truth deeper into the cracks she could no longer hide. When Marissa asked why he looked pale, he only shrugged and said work had been stressful. She didn't push. She was already drowning in her own panic. That night, Lily asked Ethan if parents could love someone else by accident. He didn't answer immediately. He sat beside her, brushing her hair out of her face, and told her love wasn't something people lost by accident, it was something they misplaced when they stopped paying attention. Lily nodded slowly, absorbing more than he wanted her to. Ethan realized then that whatever came next could no longer be delayed. The kids had already begun building their explanations. They were waiting for honesty, and honesty couldn't coexist with the lie sitting between the adults who were supposed to protect them. The next step wasn't confrontation, it was preparation. Because Marissa wasn't just hiding something, she was planning for the moment she'd be forced to choose. And Ethan knew now he couldn't let her choose while holding all the cards. Ethan spent the next several days moving through the house as if he were mapping a landscape that no longer matched the memories he had of it. Every routine felt distorted. Marissa's rush exits, her sudden bursts of cheerfulness that didn't survive more than a minute, her obsessive attention to her phone. She tried harder now, too hard, asking the kids about school with a tight smile, offering to bake cookies at 9 at night, suggesting board games she never had patience for before. The kids weren't fooled. Caleb kept glancing at Ethan to see how he reacted, and Lily watched her mother the way children watch unfamiliar dogs carefully, without stepping too close. Ethan didn't confront anything yet. He'd understood his role had shifted. He was no longer trying to preserve the marriage. He was collecting the truth before she attempted to rewrite it. The truth came faster than he expected. 2 days later, Ethan received a call from their credit card company about unusual weekend charges. Before returning the call, he checked the bank app and saw the charges lined up perfectly with the dates from the hotel receipt. The same hotel, a newer stay, paid under Marissa's name, but using a different credit card number, a card he didn't recognize. When Marissa got home that evening carrying grocery bags she didn't need and humming a tune she didn't like, Ethan knew she was attempting to distract him preemptively. She moved around the kitchen with exaggerated affection, kissing the kids on their heads, offering Ethan a drink, talking about mundane things as if reading from a script. Ethan let the performance breathe. After dinner, while the kids worked on homework, Ethan quietly checked her purse again, not to catch her, but to confirm a suspicion. The unfamiliar credit card was there, tucked into a slim pocket she'd never used before. Her phone, charging on the counter for once, lit up with a preview banner containing a name he recognized only from the hotel receipt. She noticed the screen at the same moment Ethan did. Panic flickered across her face so quickly she almost hid it, but not quickly enough. She grabbed the phone, turned it face down, and asked Ethan with forced lightness if he wanted to watch a movie. He told her no. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting toward the hallway where the kids sat coloring. She wasn't just hiding anymore, she was planning, recalibrating, rehearsing her defense. That night Ethan slept lightly, eyes open to the glow beneath the door as Marissa paced the hallway, talking in hushed tones to someone who was no longer careful about timing. He heard fragments. "I can't yet. He's watching everything. We need to wait." And the kind of silence afterward that felt less like regret and more like calculation. The next morning brought the moment that cut through all remaining hope. Lily came downstairs holding Marissa's scarf, asking where Mom had gone so early again. Ethan didn't have an answer ready. Marissa had claimed she'd be home all morning. An hour later, while Ethan helped Caleb assemble a science project, a notification pinged on the shared tablet. The kind of automated hotel check-in receipt Marissa must have forgotten was linked to their family email. Ethan clicked it. Same hotel, same man's signature, same suite number. This time, Ethan didn't hesitate. He packed the kids into the car, telling them they were going to Grandma's for the afternoon, and drove with a calm he didn't recognize in himself. When he arrived back home alone, he waited. He sat at the kitchen table, turning the hotel email into a printed page he placed neatly beside the original receipt. By the time Marissa walked through the door, hair freshly styled, clothes carefully chosen for a morning of errands, Ethan didn't feel anger anymore, just the hollow certainty that whatever version of their life she believed she could salvage had already dissolved. She froze when she saw the pages. For a split second, she looked like someone who'd been caught not in an affair, but in a lie she believed she was still smart enough to outrun. Then the panic returned, thick and obvious. She stepped backward, then forward, then reached for the receipts with a trembling hand as if taking them would undo the truth they held. Ethan covered the papers with his palm, not forcefully, just enough to stop her. He asked one question, only one. How long? She didn't answer. Instead, she said he was overreacting, that he didn't understand the context, that the man was someone helping with the anniversary plan, and that Ethan was ruining a moment that wasn't meant to be ruined. Her voice broke over the last sentence, not from grief but from fear. Fear not of losing him, but of losing her version of the story. When Ethan said he'd move the kids to his mother's for a few days, something in Marissa snapped into place. Not remorse, not horror. Strategy. She said he was being dramatic. She said he was confusing the children. She warned him not to escalate things that would make the family talk. She insisted he think about what people would assume, what neighbors would whisper, what their kids' teachers might believe. Then she said the words that made everything suddenly, irreversibly clear. If you tell anyone, I won't protect you when this blows back. Ethan stared at her, realizing she had crossed a line he didn't even know existed. There was no confession coming, no apology, no desperate attempt to save the life they had built. There was only fear of exposure, only consequence management, only calculation. Ethan picked up the papers, folded them once, and told her they would talk tomorrow after. He spoke to a lawyer. Marissa's face went pale, not because she feared losing him, but because she finally understood he wasn't going to play the role she needed him to play. Not anymore. The truth was no longer something she could steer. It was something already heading toward her. Whether she ran or not, Ethan walked into the courthouse on a gray morning that felt strangely quiet, as if the world itself was waiting to see what he would choose to carry forward and what he would finally set down. He wasn't nervous, his hands were steady, his steps even, but there was a heaviness behind his ribs that came from knowing the future would not look anything like the life he had spent 10 years building. Marissa arrived flanked by her parents, both of whom had perfected the strained expression of people who believed their daughter's version of the story because the alternative would force them to question every moment they had proudly defended her. Her mother barely glanced at Ethan, and her father muttered something about keeping this civil for the kids, as if civility had been an option left on the table. Marissa avoided Ethan's eyes completely. She looked thinner, worn down by weeks of frantic damage control, but still clinging to the composure of someone who believed presentation could rewrite truth. Her lawyer had prepared a narrative built around emotional abandonment, overwork, and a husband who misinterpreted her efforts to plan a surprise. They treated the affair as an accusation Ethan invented out of insecurity, something unproven and unlikely for a devoted mother like Marissa. Ethan didn't react. He simply handed his attorney a neatly organized folder of receipts, timelines, screenshots, GPS logs, and the hotel email she forgot was connected to their shared account. Each piece was presented without commentary, the facts speaking for themselves with an authority Marissa's story couldn't counter. The judge asked direct questions, and that was when Marissa's carefully controlled story began to sputter. She couldn't explain why she had a hotel reservation under her name for multiple weekends. She couldn't explain the unfamiliar credit card. She couldn't explain the early morning absences, the late-night calls, or why her phone records aligned perfectly with the man's number Ethan had quietly traced weeks earlier. When asked if the affair had occurred, she refused to answer, claiming the question was inappropriate and inflammatory. Silence filled the room like fog. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Her parents looked stunned, realizing for the first time that Marissa wasn't being misinterpreted. She had simply lied to them too. But the moment that truly shifted the hearing wasn't the evidence. It was Lily's school counselor, who described gently, but clearly, how Lily had been asking whether parents could accidentally love someone else, and how Caleb flinched when Marissa arrived late to pick him up. as if unsure she was supposed to come at all. The judge listened with a tightened expression that spoke louder than reprimands. When Marissa tried to interject, saying the counselor was exaggerating, her voice cracked, revealing not pain, but desperation. It was obvious she wasn't fighting for her children, she was fighting for her image. The ruling wasn't dramatic, it was precise. Shared custody, but structured in a way that removed flexibility Marissa had abused. A financial schedule based on documented contributions, not emotional pleas. Mandatory co-parenting classes for both, though the judge emphasized that one parent appears to be compensating for emotional instability introduced into the home. Marissa's lips parted as if she'd been struck. Her parents sat frozen, neither stepping forward to console her. When the judge adjourned, she turned to Ethan, voice trembling, saying he had humiliated her, destroyed her reputation, and made this permanent. Ethan said only one sentence: "I didn't destroy anything you didn't already burn." Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded with people pretending not to stare. Marissa walked away quickly, shielding her face, calling someone with the urgency of a person trying to rebuild a collapsing story. Ethan didn't chase her. He walked to his car, sat inside for a moment, and allowed himself a single long breath that felt like the first real exhale in months. In the weeks that followed, life didn't snap back into place, but it settled. Slowly, honestly, the kids adapted to the new routine. Caleb began sleeping through the night again. Lily stopped asking whether Mommy was out helping someone, replacing her questions with drawings of two houses, connected by a dotted line she labeled Safe Path. Ethan cooked more, laughed more, existed without the weight of constantly monitoring the ground beneath his feet. Marissa struggled. Her family supported her at first, then began pulling away when they realized she was still rewriting the story instead of repairing the damage. The man from the hotel never resurfaced. Her calls to Ethan grew shorter, clipped, strictly logistical. She avoided looking at him during custody exchanges, as though eye contact might expose her to consequences she wasn't ready to accept. But the true moral didn't come from her downfall. It came from the steady rebuilding of the small things. Ethan teaching Lily how to braid her hair for school because she wanted dad-style braids. Caleb laughing while stirring pancake batter. The house filled with the kind of quiet that wasn't tense anymore, but peaceful. Ethan learned that betrayal wasn't just the breaking of trust, it was the rewriting of reality to make the injured party doubt their own senses. He refused to let that be the story his children grew up believing. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel vindicated. He felt aligned, whole, in a way that only truth sharp, unwelcome, but clean could carve out. Some things, he realized, weren't meant to be saved. They were meant to be survived. And he had